There is a figure you need to understand right now. Most reporting this week has not mentioned him by name, and that omission is a serious error, because understanding who this individual is, why he was selected for his current role, and what he said on Iranian state television yesterday tells you more about the next 6 days of this conflict than anything that has emerged from the negotiating rooms in Islamabad or Tehran. His name is Mohsen Rezaei. He is 69 years old. He commanded Iran's Revolutionary Guards from 1981 to 1997, 16 consecutive years during which he personally oversaw the Iran-Iraq War, directed the development of Iran's ballistic missile program, and engineered the transformation of the IRGC from a loosely organized revolutionary militia into the most formidable military institution in the entire Middle East. He sought the Iranian presidency for separate times. He failed each time, but electoral defeat is not the point here. The point is this: when Iran's newly installed Supreme Leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, the son of the man American forces killed on February 28, needed someone to serve as his personal military advisor in March, he selected Mohsen Rezaei, and yesterday, sitting before Iranian state television cameras in full military uniform, Rezaei delivered a statement that should have dominated every headline on earth. He said that American warships operating near the Strait of Hormuz would be destroyed by Iran's first missile salvo. He said those vessels were fully within range and could be eliminated. And then he added something that has received almost no serious coverage despite being arguably more consequential than the threat itself. He stated clearly that he personally opposed any extension of the current ceasefire whatsoever, not in favor of extending the ceasefire at all. That single sentence, spoken publicly on state television by the man currently serving as the Supreme Leader's personal military advisor, with exactly 6 days remaining before the ceasefire expires on April 22nd, while Pakistan's army chief is physically present in Tehran attempting to arrange a second round of negotiations. While the White House is simultaneously expressing optimism about deal prospects, that sentence is what demands serious and careful analysis right now. Because the question most coverage is failing to ask is not whether Rezaei personally wants the ceasefire terminated. The real question is why Mojtaba Khamenei appointed him in the first place. And when you examine that question with genuine rigor, the answer is neither straightforward nor comforting, and its implications are not what you might initially expect. To fully grasp the significance of the Rezaei appointment, you first need a complete picture of who Mojtaba Khamenei actually is and the circumstances through which he became Supreme Leader, because this is context that most people outside Iran entirely lack. On February 28, 2026, the opening wave of Operation Epic Fury strikes killed Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. He was 85 years old and had held the position since 1989. His death triggered an immediate constitutional emergency. Iran's system requires the assembly of experts to formally select any new Supreme Leader, but that body was in no condition to convene openly. Its offices had been destroyed in early March strikes, and its members were genuinely fearful for their personal safety. What followed, according to multiple credible reports, including Iran International, was a rapid and forceful intervention by IRGC commanders. Those commanders reportedly applied sustained pressure on Assembly of Experts members through repeated contact and both psychological and political coercion, pushing them toward endorsing Mojtaba Khamenei as the successor. The vote was conducted online under active wartime conditions, with security concerns making any in-person gathering impossible. On March 9, just 11 days after his father's assassination, Mojtaba Khamenei was formally announced as Iran's new Supreme Leader. What makes this profoundly significant is what we do and do not know about Mojtaba Khamenei as a leader. He is 56 years old. He has spent virtually his entire career operating within the shadowy intelligence structures of the IRGC rather than in any public-facing political capacity. He is widely assessed by analysts as ideologically closer to the IRGC's hardline faction than his father had become during his later years, and he assumed power under the most extreme imaginable circumstances, his father killed, his country under direct military assault from the world's most powerful military. What Mojtaba Khamenei genuinely believes, what outcomes he actually seeks, and what kind of supreme leader he intends to become are questions that nobody outside an extremely small circle within Tehran can answer with any honest confidence. That includes, I would argue, American intelligence analysts, the negotiators currently sitting across from Iran's delegation in Islamabad, and the White House, which this Wednesday declared it felt positive about deal prospects without offering any substantive explanation for that optimism. And layered beneath all of this sits an even more fundamental question that coverage almost never confronts directly. Even if Mojtaba Khamenei genuinely desires a negotiated settlement, does he currently possess the political strength necessary to override the hardline Nerg factions that engineered his ascent to power in the first place? In Iran's constitutional framework, the supreme leader holds ultimate authority, but that authority is sustained by political coalitions, by institutional relationships, and above all by the loyalty of IRG commanders who physically control the missiles, the drone fleets, and the fast attack boats operating in the Gulf. Mojtaba Khamenei owes his position entirely to those commanders, and those commanders, represented most visibly at this precise moment by Mohsen Rezaei, have made their position on ceasefire extension publicly and unmistakably clear. Let me tell you specifically about Rezaei, because his appointment communicates something critical about Iran's current internal politics that is being almost entirely overlooked by mainstream coverage. Every serious analyst who studies Iran describes Mohsen Rezaei as a hardliner, but the description that appears repeatedly across multiple independent assessments is more precise and more significant than that. He is described as a hardliner even within the Revolutionary Guards themselves. That specific qualification matters enormously. The IRG is already the hardline institution of Iranian politics. It is the organization that controls Iran's missile arsenal, its drone programs, its intelligence networks, and its entire web of regional proxy forces. It is the institution that sealed the Strait of Hormuz on the opening day of this conflict. It is the institution that shot down an American F-15E fighter jet over Iranian territory on April 3rd, and within that already hardline organization, Rezaei is considered to sit further toward the extreme than most of his peers. This is the man who, when asked yesterday about the theoretical possibility of an American ground invasion of Iranian territory, responded that such an invasion would be welcomed because Iran would capture thousands of hostages and extract $1 billion per hostage from Washington. This is not the language of negotiation. This is not the vocabulary of compromise, ceasefire extension, or diplomatic progress. This is the language of a man who commanded the Revolutionary Guards through 16 years of the most brutal warfare in modern Middle Eastern history and who has never once publicly retreated from the position that Iran must not yield to external military pressure. He opposed the 2015 nuclear agreement. He opposed it publicly and consistently, and he accepted the appointment as personal military advisor to the new Supreme Leader in March, while ceasefire negotiations were already actively underway, while Pakistan was already shuttling communications between Washington and Tehran, while the entire diplomatic framework was being constructed on the foundational assumption that Iran was genuinely seeking resolution. So why would Mojtaba Khamenei appoint this specific man at this specific moment? I want to offer three distinct explanations because understanding all three matters. The correct answer, or more likely the correct combination of answers, determines what happens when the clock reaches April 22nd. The first explanation is that Mojtaba Khamenei's own ideological position is genuinely closer to Rezaei's than to that of Foreign Minister IRGC, and the appointment reflects his authentic preference for continued confrontation over any negotiated settlement requiring concessions on nuclear enrichment, if this explanation is correct. The talks currently occurring in Pakistan are purely a delay mechanism. Iran is exploiting the ceasefire window to rebuild degraded military capacity. Satellite imagery has already confirmed this activity. The Rezaei appointment in this reading is a deliberate signal directed at both the IRG establishment and the Iranian public, communicating that the new supreme leader has no intention of capitulating to American demands. In this scenario, April 22nd marks the resumption of open warfare. The second explanation is that Mojtaba Khamenei is genuinely pursuing a negotiated outcome but requires substantial political cover from IRG hardliners to make the necessary concessions without being politically destroyed in the process. By placing Rezaei, the most uncompromising figure available, the man who led the Guards for 16 years, into the advisor role, Khamenei is effectively purchasing credibility with the IRG establishment. He is demonstrating that the toughest possible voice is sitting beside him and therefore any agreement he reaches cannot be characterized as weakness or surrender. He then uses that political protection to approach the negotiating table and offer concessions that would be completely untenable without it. Under this explanation, Rezaei's public opposition to ceasefire extension is genuinely his personal view as he himself framed it, and the distinction between his personal position and the Supreme Leader's actual position is critical and real. The third explanation is the most uncomfortable of the three. It proposes that Mojtaba Khamenei does not yet exercise genuine consolidated control over Iranian decision-making, and that the Rezaei appointment reflects not a deliberate strategic selection but a political constraint imposed from outside, that the IRG commanders who engineered Khamenei's rushed installation as supreme leader through an online vote conducted under wartime duress retain commanding influence over his decisions, and that Rezaei's presence at the supreme leader's side represents less a free choice by Khamenei and more a placement by the IRG to ensure the new leader does not offer concessions. The hardline military establishment refuses to accept. Under this explanation, Rezaei is not functioning as an advisor at all. He is functioning as a monitor, and the personal view he broadcast on state television is not personal in any meaningful sense. It is an institutional warning delivered by the organization controlling Iran's entire military apparatus to anyone who believes this conflict is concluding on terms that require abandoning nuclear enrichment. Now consider why America has offered no official response to any of this, because that silence is as analytically significant as anything Rezaei actually said. The White House this Wednesday expressed optimism about deal prospects. The State Department issued no formal response to Rezaei's explicit threat to destroy American warships. Central Command made no public statement regarding the Supreme Leader's military advisor openly opposing ceasefire extension. The first reason for this silence is that formally responding to Rezaei elevates his statements into official Iranian positions that America must then address directly. While his comments remain framed as personal views, they can be treated as such. Once Washington responds formally, that framing becomes impossible to maintain. The second reason is diplomatic timing. Pakistan's army chief is physically present in Tehran carrying messages from Washington. Publicly engaging Rezaei's threats injects damaging interference into that channel at precisely the wrong moment. The third reason is the most revealing. America may genuinely not know how much weight Rezaei's statements deserve. Is he speaking in alignment with Mojtaba Khamenei or in tension with him? Is this coordinated signaling or authentic internal division? The intelligence picture of where the new Supreme Leader actually stands remains deeply uncertain, and until that picture clarifies, public silence combined with open diplomatic channels is the only defensible posture available. But here is what America's sustained public silence is actually costing, and this is the dimension that keeps demanding attention regardless of how the diplomatic framing shifts around it. Every day that Rezaei occupies the Supreme Leader's advisor position and Washington says nothing in response is a day his stance gains implicit validation inside Iran. The hardline IRG faction is watching the American response with extraordinary attention when Washington stays silent after Rezaei publicly threatens to sink its warships. That silence is not interpreted inside Iran as careful diplomatic restraint. It is read as confirmation that America lacks a credible answer. It feeds precisely the kind of incremental confidence that Iran has been steadily accumulating since February 28, each unanswered provocation adding another rung to a ladder of emboldened calculation. There is something else equally important that this silence obscures. The ceasefire that expires on April 22 was originally approved by Mojtaba Khamenei through entirely secret communications, according to detailed reporting, at a moment when he was conveying messages through physical runners carrying handwritten notes because he genuinely feared assassination. That was a leader operating under conditions of extreme personal duress, making consequential strategic decisions in circumstances no leader should ever face. 6 weeks later, the situation has fundamentally changed. Khamenei is more consolidated in his position. The immediate and overwhelming fear of personal assassination has presumably diminished. The ceasefire itself has now held for 2 weeks, and Iran has used every day of that window deliberately and systematically. Satellite imagery confirms ongoing reconstruction of degraded missile infrastructure. Chinese surface-to-air missile systems have been delivered into Iranian hands. Resupply operations have continued flowing through China's parallel oil trading network. The military organization that the ceasefire was supposed to freeze in place has been actively reconstituting itself throughout the pause. And now the man Khamenei selected to counsel him on the IRG's most sensitive and consequential strategic questions is sitting on state television declaring publicly that the ceasefire should not continue. The leader who approved the original ceasefire in fear and secrecy is being advised by the man who wants to terminate it. 6 days from now, one of those two competing impulses determines what the world wakes up to on April 23rd. Pakistan's army chief arrived in Tehran carrying direct communications from Washington. He met with Foreign Minister IRGC Every official diplomatic signal describes him as a productive intermediary. The White House is expressing genuine optimism. Regional sources are indicating preliminary agreement exists in principle to extend the ceasefire beyond its current expiration. Every formal indicator points toward continuation. And simultaneously, Mohsen Rezaei, wearing his military uniform, sitting before Iranian state television cameras, told the entire watching world that he opposes any ceasefire extension and described in precise operational detail what Iranian forces would do to American naval vessels if hostilities resumed. Both of those realities exist simultaneously. They cannot both determine the outcome. Exactly one of them will, and the answer depends entirely on something that nobody outside a confined and heavily guarded room somewhere in Tehran can tell you with genuine confidence, whether Mojtaba Khamenei is fundamentally the leader who whispered ceasefire approval through runners carrying handwritten notes, or whether he is fundamentally the leader who deliberately chose Mohsen Rezaei to sit beside him and shape what comes next. There is one final dimension to this moment that extends its significance far beyond the immediate 6-day window. When American forces killed Ali Khamenei on February 28, the strategic logic embedded in that decision rested on a specific assumption that eliminating Iran's supreme leader would effectively decapitate the Iranian state's decision-making architecture and create conditions for faster conflict resolution. 35 years of accumulated institutional authority removed in a single strike. The underlying calculation was that whoever emerged as successor would necessarily be weaker, less certain, and more willing to accept negotiated terms that the elder Khamenei would never have considered. What actually materialized is substantially more complicated and strategically ironic. Mojtaba Khamenei came to power through erg pressure, in a rushed and irregular process, with no independently established political base of his own, and precisely because he lacks that independent base, he is more structurally dependent on erg support for his basic legitimacy than his father had been during his final years in power. Ali Khamenei could periodically override erg hardliners because for decades of institutional authority stood behind every decision he made. Mojtaba Khamenei has 6 weeks of wartime leadership, and the man the erg positioned beside him as his primary military council does not want the ceasefire extended under any circumstances. America removed one supreme leader and produced a successor who is more exposed to erg hardline pressure, not less. That is the precise strategic irony buried inside this moment, and it is the reason why the next 6 days and the deeper question of who Mojtaba Khamenei genuinely is as a leader carries consequences not merely for this ceasefire but for every subsequent negotiation and confrontation involving Iran that follows it. Watch what happens in Tehran specifically over the next 48 hours, not what the White House announces, not what Pakistan's foreign ministry releases to the press. Watch what Mojtaba Khamenei himself does. Watch whether Rezaei speaks again publicly. Watch whether his television statements are followed by clarifying communications from Iran's foreign ministry formally distancing the government from his expressed position, or watch whether official Iranian diplomatic channels remain silent and Rezaei's threat to stand as the final public word from the Supreme Leader's inner circle before the ceasefire clock reaches zero. That silence, or the deliberate breaking of it, is the single most consequential signal available this week. And Washington, which has offered no public comment on any of this, is watching for exactly the same thing. 2 competing visions inside a single Iranian leadership, 6 days remaining, one outcome possible. Which vision wins determines everything that follows.